The world watched with bated breath as Russian President Vladimir Putin declared a 72-hour unilateral ceasefire in Ukraine. This pause in the conflict, timed to coincide with the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, was meant to be a moment of reflection and remembrance. However, instead of cautious optimism, the announcement was met with skepticism and suspicion, particularly from Ukraine. Previous ceasefires, including one during the Easter holiday, had failed to hold. Both sides accused the other of violations, and the promised respite from violence never materialized. Ukrainian President Zelensky and his administration, scarred by past betrayals, expressed deep distrust in Russia's motives. They pointed to Russia's continued military buildup and aggressive rhetoric as evidence that the ceasefire was a tactical ploy rather than a genuine step towards peace. This skepticism is rooted in the bitter reality of a war that has dragged on for far too long. Ukrainian civilians and soldiers alike have witnessed firsthand the brutality of the conflict, and many struggle to reconcile Russia's pronouncements of peace with the daily reality of shelling and bloodshed. The ceasefire, while a glimmer of hope, is viewed by many in Ukraine as a temporary lull in a storm that is far from over. While the guns have momentarily fallen silent, the underlying issues that sparked the conflict remain unresolved. Russia, in no uncertain terms, has laid out its demands for a lasting peace. These demands, however, are far from palatable for Ukraine and its Western allies. At the forefront of Russia's ultimatum is the insistence on international recognition of the territories it has annexed since the war began. This includes Crimea, which Russia seized in 2014, as well as the more recently claimed regions of Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. Beyond territorial concessions, Russia also demands the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, a nebulous concept widely interpreted as a call for regime change in Kyiv. Furthermore, Moscow insists that Ukraine be permanently barred from joining NATO, effectively demanding a sphere of influence over its neighbor. These demands, seen by many as non-starters, highlight the vast gulf that separates the two sides in the conflict. The timing of Russia's ceasefire, coinciding with the anniversary of the Allied victory in World War II, is laden with historical significance. Putin has repeatedly invoked the memory of the Soviet Union's sacrifices in the fight against Nazi Germany, attempting to draw a parallel to the current conflict and frame Russia as the heir to that legacy. This narrative, however, has been met with resistance both within Ukraine and internationally. The United States, meanwhile, finds itself walking a tightrope. The Biden administration has provided significant military and financial aid to Ukraine, but it remains wary of escalating the conflict into a direct confrontation with Russia. The recent meeting between U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and Putin, where the Russian leader signaled a potential willingness to engage in talks without preconditions, offers a glimmer of hope. However, the U.S. is also grappling with the legacy of its own foreign policy decisions, particularly its role in NATO expansion, which Russia cites as a key factor in the current conflict. The Biden administration faces the daunting task of balancing support for Ukraine with the need to manage relations with a nuclear-armed Russia and prevent the war from spiraling into a wider global conflict. As the 72-hour ceasefire comes to an end, the world waits anxiously to see what comes next. Whether this brief pause will provide a foundation for meaningful negotiations remains to be seen. The deep mistrust between the warring parties, coupled with the maximalist demands of the Russian side, suggests that a negotiated settlement will be difficult to achieve. The specter of renewed violence looms large. The recent surge in fighting, with both sides exchanging long-range strikes and suffering casualties, underscores the fragility of the situation. The involvement of North Korean troops, fighting alongside Russian forces, adds another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. The path to peace in Ukraine remains treacherous and uncertain. The ceasefire, while a welcome respite, is but a small step on a long and arduous journey. Whether this fragile truce can be transformed into a lasting peace will depend on the willingness of all sides to engage in good faith negotiations, to compromise, and to prioritize the lives and futures of the millions caught in the crossfire. Only then can the guns fall silent for good.